My mother didn't give birth to me. She trained me to be her replacement. But today, my shift finally ended. I never asked to be born into the role of substitute parent. That responsibility was thrust upon me on a humid Tuesday afternoon when I was 7 years old, standing in our cramped kitchen in Springfield, Illinois, watching my mother Linda stumble through the door at 3 in the afternoon, reeking of cheap wine and someone else's cologne. My baby brother Marcus was screaming in his crib upstairs, his diaper soaked through, and my little sister Emma sat on the living room floor, her small hands covered in dried cereal she'd tried to feed herself for breakfast. That was the day I learned what it meant to be needed, to be essential, to be trapped. For the next 12 years, I became Sophia Martinez, the girl who packed lunches, signed permission slips, and stayed up until 2 in the morning folding laundry while my mother sprawled on the couch with whatever man she'd dragged home that week. I became the mother my siblings needed, the parent Linda refused to be. And for 12 years, I convinced myself this was temporary, that one day she'd wake up and remember she had 3 children who needed her, that one day I'd get to be just a daughter, just a sister, just a kid. I was wrong. The morning everything changed started like any other miserable Monday in our small rental house on Maple Street. The November air carried that particular kind of cold that seeps into your bones, the kind that makes you wish you could afford to run the heat above 60 degrees. I'd woken up at 5:30, as I did every school day, to make sure Marcus and Emma had clean clothes and something resembling a nutritious breakfast. The kitchen was a disaster zone, remnants of Linda's Sunday night party scattered across every surface. Empty beer bottles lined the counter, ashtrays overflowed, and someone had spilled what looked like vodka all over the linoleum floor. I cleaned it all, as I always did. Wiped down the counters, threw away the bottles, scrubbed the floor on my hands and knees. By the time Marcus shuffled downstairs at 6:45, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the kitchen looked almost normal, almost like we were a regular family, almost like we had a mother who cared. I was pouring orange juice into Emma's favorite plastic cup, the one with the faded unicorn on the side, when I heard Linda's bedroom door creak open. My stomach tightened instinctively. Morning interactions with my mother were always a gamble. Some days, she'd ignore us completely, padding to the bathroom without so much as a glance in our direction. Other days, she'd be cheerful in that manic way that meant she was still drunk from the night before. And on the worst days, she'd be angry, looking for someone to blame for the hangover pounding behind her eyes. This Monday was different. This Monday, she had an audience. Linda emerged from her bedroom wearing a cheap silk bathrobe I'd never seen before, the kind you might find at a discount store trying to look expensive. Behind her followed a man I'd seen maybe twice, a heavy-set guy with a receding hairline and a cocky smile. Rick, I thought his name was, or maybe Randy. She went through them so quickly, I'd stopped bothering to remember their names. They settled at the kitchen table, and I felt their eyes on me as I moved around the space, helping Emma with her breakfast, reminding Marcus to brush his teeth before the bus came. I could sense something was coming. The air felt electric with anticipation, the way it does right before a thunderstorm. Linda cleared her throat dramatically. "Sophia, come here. We need to talk." I set down the dish towel I'd been using and turned to face her, arms crossed over my chest. Defensive posture, I know, but 12 years of dealing with her unpredictability had taught me to always be on guard. She slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. Not a handwritten note, not a grocery list, but a typed, official-looking document with a notary seal at the bottom. The header read, "Family Responsibility Agreement" in bold professional font. "What is this?" I asked, though something in my gut already sensed the trap closing around me. Linda leaned back in her chair, one arm draped over the back, a cigarette dangling from her other hand, even though she knew I hated when she smoked around the kids. "It's an agreement. You're going to sign it, Sophia, right now. This whole thing where you play house and pretend to be everyone's mother, it's over. You make the kids dependent on you, and it makes me look like a bad mother." The laugh that burst from my lips was sharp, almost painful. "You need a piece of paper to prove that?" I thought the monthly electricity shut-off notices were evidence enough. Rick leaned forward, inserting himself into the conversation with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Listen, kid, your mom just wants you to have your own life. Go find a boyfriend, have some fun. Stop worrying about diapers and homework." I stared at the document, my eyes scanning the typed words. It was insane, absolutely insane. A legal contract outlining how I was to step back from all parental responsibilities, how I was to act like a normal teenage sister and let Linda handle the day-to-day care of Marcus and Emma. There were clauses about not doing laundry, not cooking meals, not helping with homework unless specifically asked by Linda herself. It was a binding agreement that essentially forced me to watch my siblings suffer. The pen felt heavy in my hand. For a moment doubt crept in. What if I refused? What if I kept doing what I'd always done? But then I looked at Linda's face, at that smug smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and something inside me shifted. A small voice whispered, "Let her have what she wants. Let her prove what kind of mother she really is." I signed the document with deliberate, forceful strokes. The sound of the pen scratching across paper felt like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. Emma looked up from her cereal, confused. Marcus had paused in the doorway, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "There," I said, setting the pen down with a decisive click. "You want this stage, Mom? It's yours. Good luck. You're going to need it." I walked upstairs to my bedroom, leaving Linda with her victory smile and Rick's approving nod, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to relief. Not happiness, not peace, but a grim satisfaction that came from knowing that sometimes the best way to prove someone wrong is to give them exactly what they ask for. I wish I could say I had some elaborate plan, some carefully orchestrated revenge scheme, but the truth was simpler and somehow more devastating. I simply stopped. Stopped doing all the things I'd been doing for 12 years. Stopped being the glue holding our fractured family together. And I watched, with a mixture of horror and vindication, as everything fell apart. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of chaos I'd spent years preventing. I woke up at my normal time out of habit, then remembered the agreement and rolled over, pulling my blanket up over my head. I could hear the panic beginning downstairs. Emma's high-pitched crying, Marcus's confused questions, Linda's raised voice, sharp with frustration. When I finally went downstairs around 8, well after the school bus had left, the house looked like a war zone. Emma was sobbing because she couldn't find any clean clothes to wear. Marcus was swearing under his breath because there was no cereal left in the box, just crumbs and dust. Linda was on the phone, her voice escalating as she tried to explain to her manager at the Walmart where she worked why she was going to be late again. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and watched. Just watched. It felt surreal, being an observer in a home where I'd always been the one holding everything together. Linda slammed her phone down and whirled on me. "Are you just going to sit there? Emma needs help." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The agreement says I'm just a sister now. Sisters don't dress their siblings. That's a mother's job. Her face went red. "Don't you dare throw that in my face. I'm trying here." "I can see that," I said mildly. "Keep trying." She ended up throwing a pair of Marcus's dirty gym shorts at Emma and telling her to wear them with a long shirt. She gave Marcus a handful of quarters and told him to get something from the vending machine at school. Then she rushed out the door, already 20 minutes late for work. Her hair barely brushed, mascara smudged under one eye. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a call from Emma's school. I didn't answer. They called again and again. Finally, they called Linda. Emma had gotten sick after eating an expired yogurt she'd found in the back of the fridge for lunch. Linda had to leave work, drive to the school, and pick her up. Her manager was not pleased. I heard about it later when Linda came home, her face tight with rage and humiliation. "This is your fault," she hissed at me as she helped Emma, pale and shaky, onto the couch. "If you'd been doing your job." "I don't have a job anymore, remember? You fired me. This is your responsibility now." That evening, Linda bought a frozen pizza for dinner. She was so flustered and exhausted that she forgot to set the timer, and it burned, filling the house with acrid smoke. Marcus took one bite and threw it in the trash. "A dog wouldn't eat this," he shouted. Linda's hand moved faster than I'd ever seen. The slap echoed through the kitchen, and Marcus's head snapped to the side. Emma started crying again. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. "Discipline," I said quietly. "Good. That's your job, after all." Linda's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something flicker there. Fear, maybe, or the first whisper of understanding. But then Rick walked in, home from whatever odd job he'd been working that day, and she turned her attention to him, to the comfort of someone who wouldn't judge, wouldn't observe, wouldn't remember every failure. Wednesday brought a new cascade of disasters. Marcus wore the same dirty clothes from the day before, because Linda had forgotten to do laundry. At school, kids made fun of him for smelling bad. He got into a fight during lunch, throwing a punch at a boy who'd called him trash kid. The school called Linda at work again. This time, she had to leave to come get him. He was suspended for 3 days. The principal's office was cold and sterile, with motivational posters on the walls that felt cruelly ironic. I only know this because Emma told me later. Linda had to sit through a lecture about parental responsibility and proper hygiene for children. She came home that evening looking smaller somehow, diminished. "This is all your fault." She screamed at me when she walked through the door. "If you'd just done the damn laundry like you always do, this wouldn't have happened." I was sitting on the couch, reading a book for my English class. I looked up calmly. The agreement specifically states that I'm only responsible for my own laundry. I'm just a sister, remember? Sisters don't do their brother's laundry. That's what you wanted. Linda picked up a plate from the coffee table and hurled it at the wall, inches from where I sat today. It shattered, fragments of ceramic exploding across the room. Emma screamed. Marcus stood frozen in the hallway. I didn't flinch, didn't move, just looked at my mother with steady, unwavering eyes. "You throw it, you clean it up," I said. "I'm not the housekeeper either." The plate stayed there for 2 days, broken pieces scattered across the floor, a monument to Linda's unraveling. Thursday morning, the power got shut off. We'd received the disconnect notice weeks ago, but Linda had spent the money for the electric bill on a new outfit and drinks at the bar. The house plunged into a cold, dim twilight. The refrigerator stopped humming. Within hours, the smell of spoiling food began to permeate the air. I used my phone flashlight to navigate the dark house, but I didn't fix anything. Didn't call the electric company, didn't offer to pay the bill with the money I'd been secretly saving from my part-time job at the library. This was Linda's show now. She'd wanted it. She could figure it out. Around midday, Emma spiked a fever. Her forehead burned under my hand when I checked it, but I pulled away quickly. Not my responsibility anymore. Linda found Emma curled up on the couch, shivering despite the 3 blankets I'd at least been kind enough to pile on top of her. Linda's voice cracked when she called me. "Sophia, please, she's burning up. I don't know what to do." I stood in my doorway, looking down at her from the top of the stairs. "Call 911, or take her to the emergency room. You're her mother." "But I don't have money for..." "Should have thought of that before you spent it on your boyfriend and bar tabs." I watched her face crumble, watched her sink onto the bottom step and cry into her hands while Emma moaned from the couch. Part of me, a small, vicious part, felt satisfied, but a larger part felt sick. Not guilty exactly, just sick. That evening, we ate peanut butter sandwiches in the dark, cold house. The bread was starting to go stale. The peanut butter was the cheap kind that sticks to the roof of your mouth. Marcus ate in silence. Emma nibbled at hers, her fever making her lethargic. Linda didn't eat at all. She just sat in the kitchen, staring at nothing, occasionally wiping at her eyes. Rick had disappeared, hadn't been around since Tuesday. When things got hard, men like him always vanished. Friday morning arrived like a reckoning. I was in my room, reading by the weak November sunlight filtering through my window, when I heard the knock on the door. Heavy, official. Not the knock of a friend or neighbor. I went downstairs slowly. Linda was already at the door, her hair unwashed, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Through the window, I could see 2 women in professional attire and a police officer standing on our porch. Child Protective Services. My heart should have raced, should have panicked. Instead, I felt an odd calm settle over me. This was it. The bill coming due. Linda opened the door, and the smell hit them immediately. Spoiled food, unwashed bodies, stale air. One of the CPS workers visibly wrinkled her nose. "Miss Martinez? I'm Sarah Chen from Child Protective Services. We've received multiple reports regarding the welfare of the children in this home. May we come in?" Linda's face went white. This isn't... We've just had a hard week. "We need to see the children," the other worker said, her voice professional but firm, "and we need to see the living conditions." They stepped inside, and I watched them take it all in. The broken plate still scattered on the floor, the overflowing trash, the smell from the dead refrigerator. Marcus sitting on the stairs in his dirty clothes. Emma listless on the couch, clearly unwell. Linda started to cry, started to make excuses, started to lie. It's just been difficult. My daughter usually helps, but she's been going through a rebellious phase, and I'm trying to teach her responsibility by making her step back, and... "Miss Martinez," I interrupted, stepping forward. "Can I show you something?" I pulled out my phone. I'd been documenting everything. Photos of the house each day, showing the progressive deterioration, videos of Linda throwing the plate, of her screaming at the kids, screenshots of bank statements showing how I'd been paying the utilities for years, and the pièce de résistance, a clear photo of that signed, notarized agreement. Sarah Chen took my phone, scrolled through it with increasingly grave expressions. "This is a contract forcing you to stop parenting your siblings?" "My mother wanted me to stop playing house," I said, my voice steady. "So I did. This is the first week she's actually been a full-time parent. This is what that looks like." Linda lunged at me then, hands outstretched. Whether to grab the phone or grab me, I wasn't sure. The police officer stepped between us smoothly. "Ma'am, you need to step back." What followed was a blur of official language and procedures. The CPS workers spoke to Marcus and Emma separately. They photographed the house. They made phone calls. Linda alternated between sobbing and trying to blame me, her voice rising to hysterical pitches. "She did this. She set me up. She's been sabotaging me." "I've been following a legal agreement that you forced me to sign," I said calmly. "I'm just a sister now, remember?" In the end, the decision was swift and devastating. Marcus and Emma would be placed in emergency protective custody. Linda collapsed when they said it, literally fell to her knees on the porch, wailing. The neighbors had come out to watch, their faces a mixture of concern and vindication. Everyone had known, on some level, that our house wasn't right. But nobody had done anything until it became impossible to ignore. Emma clung to me as the CPS workers tried to lead her to their car. Her small fingers dug into my arm, her fever-bright eyes pleading. Don't let them take me, Sophie. Please. It took everything in me to gently pry her fingers away. You'll be safe, I promise. They'll take care of you. But I want you. I know, baby, I know. Marcus was crying too, trying to be tough but failing. He was only 11, still just a kid who needed his mother, even if that mother had never really been there for him. As the CPS car pulled away, I stood on the porch and watched my mother on her knees in the dead grass of our front yard, her hands covering her face, her whole body shaking with sobs. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not guilt, just an empty, echoing nothing. I walked back inside, past Linda, and went to my room. I'd already packed a bag. I'd been planning this for days, maybe years. I had enough saved to rent a small room in a house near the community college. I had my job at the library. I had my grades, nearly perfect despite everything. I had options. For the first time in my life, I had options. Sophie, Linda called from downstairs, her voice wrecked. Please, don't leave me. I picked up my bag and walked down the stairs one last time. She was standing in the doorway, looking older than her 37 years, her makeup streaked down her face, her hands shaking. How could you do this to me? She whispered. I'm your mother. You were never my mother, I said. You were a cautionary tale, a lesson in what not to become. I walked past her, out the door, down the cracked sidewalk toward the bus stop. I didn't look back. The legal proceedings took months. I was 18 by then, technically an adult, but still in high school. I testified at Linda's hearing, and I didn't hold back. I brought my documentation, my bank statements showing years of paying bills that should have been her responsibility, permission slips I'd forged her signature on, report cards she'd never looked at. I brought the agreement she'd forced me to sign, with its ridiculous clauses and notarized seal. The prosecutor painted a picture of systematic neglect and emotional abuse. Linda's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been overwhelmed, that she'd made mistakes but loved her children. The judge didn't buy it. Miss Martinez, the judge said, her voice stern, you had a child take on adult responsibilities from the age of 7. When that child finally stepped back, you proved yourself completely incapable of basic parenting. You endangered your children through neglect. This court has no choice but to terminate your parental rights. Linda wailed in the courtroom. Her mother, my grandmother who lived 3 states away and had never bothered to check on us, finally showed up and tried to take custody of Marcus and Emma. CPS investigated and found her home suitable enough. The kids went to live with her in Ohio. Linda was sentenced to probation and mandatory parenting classes, though she no longer had children to parent. She had to do community service. She lost her job at Walmart after missing too many shifts. She had to sell the house to pay her lawyer fees and ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town. I moved forward with my life. I finished high school with a 4 gigapascals. I wrote my college essay about survival, about raising myself and 2 other children in a house without adults. I titled it, The Art of Survival, Growing Up Without Grown-Ups. It won me a full scholarship to Ohio State University. I chose psychology as my major. I wanted to understand people like my mother, people who bring children into the world and then abandon them emotionally while still being physically present. I wanted to understand how someone could look at their 7-year-old daughter and see a solution to their problems rather than a child to protect. I maintained contact with Marcus and Emma through emails and video calls. They were doing better with my grandmother. She was strict but present, and that was what they needed. Marcus joined the soccer team at his new school. Emma's fever had been a simple flu that proper rest and medicine cleared up quickly. They asked me when I would come visit, and I promised I would soon. The day before I left for college, I did something I told myself I wouldn't do. I drove to Linda's apartment complex. It was a run-down place on the edge of town, where the streetlights were always broken and police sirens were a nightly soundtrack. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, debating whether to go to her door. Finally, I got out and climbed the exterior stairs to the 2nd floor. Her apartment was number 2C. I knocked. She answered after a long moment, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Her hair was streaked with gray that she'd stopped bothering to dye. She wore a t-shirt with stains and pajama pants even though it was 3 in the afternoon. When she saw me, her expression cycled through shock, hope, and then bitterness. Come to gloat? She asked, her voice hoarse. No, I said. I came to say goodbye. I'm leaving for college tomorrow. She laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Of course you are. College, a scholarship. You get to ride off into the sunset while my life is destroyed. Your life isn't destroyed, Mom. You just finally have to live it yourself, without a child doing it for you. You ruined me, Sophia. You set me up. You planned this whole thing. I looked at her for a long moment. In the dim light of her apartment doorway, I could see past the bitterness to the fear underneath. She was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of being responsible, scared of the future she'd created through years of selfish choices. I didn't ruin you, I said quietly. I just stopped saving you. I stopped being your solution. And without me there to fix everything you broke, everyone finally saw what I'd been dealing with for 12 years. I'm your mother. You gave birth to me. That doesn't make you a mother. Mothers show up. Mothers sacrifice. Mothers put their children first. You never did any of that. Her face crumpled, and she started to cry. Real tears this time. Not the manipulative kind she used to use to get what she wanted. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be okay. That's not my problem anymore, I said, and I meant it. Not cruelly, just factually. You spent 19 years stealing from me. My childhood, my innocence, my security. Everything a mother is supposed to provide, you took away, and when I finally sent you the bill for all of that, you couldn't pay it. That's on you, not me. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Please, don't go like this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I was a terrible mother. I know I failed you. But please, can't we try to fix this? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. Maybe someday, but not today. Not for a long time. You need to figure out who you are without me propping you up. And I need to figure out who I am without you dragging me down. I gently removed her hand and walked away. I heard her calling after me, heard the desperation in her voice, but I didn't turn around. I got in my car, an old Honda Civic I'd bought with my library earnings, and I drove away. As I merged onto the highway heading east toward Columbus and my new life, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I looked peaceful. Not happy exactly, but peaceful, free. College was everything I'd hoped it would be and nothing like I'd expected. The freedom was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. For the first few weeks, I'd wake up in a panic, thinking I'd overslept and Marcus needed help getting ready for school, or Emma needed lunch packed, or there were bills to pay. Then I'd remember where I was, and I'd sink back into my dorm room bed, marveling at the simple fact that I only had to worry about myself. My roommate was a girl named Jessica from a suburb of Cleveland. She came from what seemed like a picture-perfect family with parents who visited every other weekend and a younger brother who called her just to chat. Watching her interact with her family was like observing an alien species. They laughed together. They hugged. Her mother brought homemade cookies and actually asked Jessica about her classes, her friends, her dreams. Your family seems really close, I said once, after her parents had left following a visit. Jessica smiled. Yeah, they're pretty great. Are you close with your family? Not really, I said, and left it at that. She didn't push, which I appreciated. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that probably wasn't entirely healthy. Psychology, sociology, child development. Every class felt personal, like I was finally getting the answers to questions I'd been asking since I was 7 years old. Why do some parents neglect their children? What are the long-term effects of parentification? How do children develop resilience in the face of trauma? I learned terms for what I'd experienced. Emotional neglect, parentification, enmeshment. Reading about them in textbooks was surreal, like someone had written the manual for my childhood, and I was only now discovering it existed. During my first Thanksgiving break, I drove to Ohio to visit Marcus and Emma. My grandmother's house was small but clean, orderly in a way our home had never been. She met me at the door with a stiff hug and a careful once-over. You look good, she said finally. College suits you. Thank you for taking them in, I replied. I know it wasn't easy. She shook her head. I should have done it years ago. I knew Linda was struggling, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I failed you, children. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get, and I accepted it with a nod. Marcus had grown 3 inches and finally looked like a kid again. Not a boy forced to grow up too fast. He showed me his room, decorated with soccer posters and trophies from his new team. Emma had gained weight, the healthy kind, and her eyes were brighter. She climbed into my lap the way she used to when she was younger, and we watched a movie together. Do you miss home? Emma asked during a quiet moment. I thought about the question carefully. I miss you and Marcus. But no, I don't miss that house, do you? She shook her head. Grandma's kind of strict, but she makes us real food, and the power never goes off. Good, I said, kissing the top of her head. That's how it should be. Marcus joined us on the couch, and for a while, we just sat together. It felt normal, peaceful, like maybe we could all be okay eventually. Do you ever talk to Mom? Marcus asked. No. Does she ask about us? I didn't know. I'd blocked Linda's number months ago. I don't know, buddy. Good, he said quietly. I don't want to talk to her either. My grandmother made a traditional Thanksgiving dinner, and sitting around her table felt like stepping into a TV show. Grace before the meal, everyone sharing what they were thankful for, no screaming or drama. It was almost unsettling in its normalcy. I returned to college Sunday evening, and the next few months flew by in a blur of classes, papers, and late-night study sessions. I made friends slowly, carefully. I didn't tell many people about my background. When classmates complained about their parents being overbearing or embarrassing, I just smiled and nodded, knowing my experience was too different to share casually. In my second semester, I started volunteering at a local shelter that helped families in crisis. I worked with kids mostly, helping with homework, playing games, just being present. One little girl, maybe 8 years old, reminded me of Emma. She was quiet and watchful, always scanning the room like she was waiting for disaster to strike. "You're good with them," my supervisor, Maria, commented one evening. "Have you thought about social work instead of research psychology?" "Maybe," I said. "I just want to help kids who are going through what I went through." "What did you go through?" And for the first time, I told someone the whole story. Maria listened without interrupting, without judgment, and when I finished, she said, "You survived something that would have broken most people. You saved yourself and gave your siblings a chance at a better life. That takes incredible strength." I'd never thought of it that way. I'd always just seen it as doing what needed to be done. But maybe she was right. Maybe survival was its own kind of victory. My sophomore year, I got an email from Linda. Somehow she'd found my university email address. The subject line read, "Please read this." I stared at it for 3 days before finally opening it. The email was long and rambling, full of apologies and explanations. She was in therapy now, she wrote. She'd been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. She was working on herself. She understood now how much she'd hurt me, hurt all of us. She wasn't asking me to forgive her, just to know that she was trying to change. I read it twice, then saved it to a folder and didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear her apologies and attempts at redemption. But not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, and I had my own healing to do. As my junior year began, I declared a double major in psychology and social work. I wanted the research background to understand the systemic issues and the practical training to actually help people. My professors encouraged me to apply for graduate programs, to consider getting my master's and eventually my doctorate. "You have a perspective that many researchers lack, Dr. Patterson," my advisor, told me. "You've lived what you're studying. That's invaluable, but it can also be painful. Make sure you're taking care of yourself." I was trying. I'd started seeing a therapist through the University Counseling Center. Slowly, I was unpacking all the years of trauma, the anger and resentment and complicated grief for the childhood I'd never had. It was hard work, harder than any class I'd ever taken. But it was necessary. The summer before my senior year, I got an internship with the state's Child Protective Services. It felt like coming full circle. I shadowed caseworkers, attended court hearings, visited homes. I saw families like mine everywhere, kids forced to be adults, parents who couldn't or wouldn't step up. But I also saw hope. I saw kids placed with loving foster families. I saw parents who fought to change, who completed their programs and regained custody. I saw the system working the way it was supposed to, protecting children and supporting families. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. One afternoon, I was reviewing case files when I came across a familiar name. Martinez, Linda. Current status, case closed, all requirements completed, no current children in home. I opened the file and read through it. She'd attended every parenting class, completed all her community service, kept up with her therapy appointments. She'd done everything the court had required of her. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the past, but it was something. My senior year, I wrote my honors thesis on the long-term effects of parentification in children of neglectful parents. I interviewed dozens of young adults who'd experienced what I had, who'd been forced to raise their siblings or take care of their parents. Their stories were heartbreaking and familiar. But what struck me most was their resilience. So many of them had not just survived but thrived, had used their experiences to fuel careers in helping professions, to build healthy families of their own. We weren't just victims, we were survivors. And that mattered. Graduation day arrived on a perfect May morning. The campus was filled with families, parents crying and taking photos, siblings running around in their fancy clothes. I sat in my cap and gown, watching the chaos, and felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Not quite sadness, not quite envy, maybe just wistfulness for what could have been. Then I saw them. Marcus, now 15 and almost as tall as me, wearing a button-up shirt and a shy smile. Emma, 12 and beautiful, holding a bouquet of flowers. And my grandmother, dressed in her best church outfit, walking slowly but determinedly across the lawn. "You came," I said, standing to hug them. "Of course we came," my grandmother said. "We're proud of you, Sophia, what you've accomplished, after everything you've been through. We wouldn't miss this for anything." Emma thrust the flowers into my hands. "These are for you. Grandma let me pick them out." "They're perfect," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for being here." We took photos together, the 4 of us, and in those pictures, I'm genuinely smiling. Not the tight, forced smile I'd worn for so many years, but a real one. I'd made it. Despite everything, I'd made it. After the ceremony, as we walked to the parking lot, Marcus asked the question I'd been dreading. Is Mom coming to graduation? No, I said simply. I didn't invite her. He nodded, not seeming surprised or upset. Good. We had lunch at a nice restaurant near campus, the kind of place I never could have afforded when I was living at home, counting pennies to keep the electricity on. My grandmother insisted on paying, and I let her. It felt good to be taken care of, just this once. As we said goodbye, Emma hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Sophie. You're the bravest person I know. You're pretty brave yourself, Em, I replied. Look how far you've come. I watched them drive away, and then I went back to my dorm to pack up my things. I'd already accepted a position with a nonprofit organization in Chicago that worked with at-risk youth. It was entry-level, the pay wasn't great, but it was exactly what I wanted to do. I was moving to the city in 2 weeks. The night before I left for Chicago, I did something I'd been putting off for 4 years. I unblocked Linda's number and sent her a single text message. I graduated from Ohio State today, psychology and social work. I'm going to work with kids like I was. I wanted you to know. She responded within minutes. I'm so proud of you. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, not yet, maybe someday, but I wanted you to know I made it. I survived. I'm okay. I know you are. You were always stronger than me. I'm sorry I made you have to be. I didn't respond to that. I turned off my phone and finished packing. Chicago was overwhelming at first. The noise, the crowds, the sheer size of everything. But I adapted quickly. I found a small studio apartment in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean and safe. I bought furniture from thrift stores and made the space my own. For the first time in my life, I had a home that was truly mine. My job was challenging in ways I hadn't expected. Working with traumatized kids brought up a lot of my own issues. There were days I'd come home and cry for hours, overwhelmed by the weight of their stories. But there were also victories. Small ones mostly, but they mattered. A kid who finally opened up about their abuse, a family that completed their program and stayed together, healthier than before, a teenager who decided to stay in school instead of dropping out. I was making a difference. It wasn't dramatic or headline-worthy, but it was real. One evening, about 6 months into my new job, I was working late at the office when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sophia? It's Rick. I froze. Rick, Linda's boyfriend, from that Monday morning 4 years ago. The man who'd sat at our kitchen table and told me to go find a boyfriend instead of worrying about my siblings. What do you want? I asked coldly. I wanted to tell you something about your mom. I ran into her a few weeks ago. She's doing okay, you know. She's got a job at a call center, nothing fancy, but she's keeping it. She goes to her therapy appointments. She's really trying. Why are you telling me this? He was quiet for a moment. Because I need to apologize. What I said to you that day, about getting a boyfriend and letting your mom handle things, I didn't know the full situation. I thought you were just some bratty teenager trying to undermine her. I didn't realize you were the only thing keeping those kids alive. You didn't want to realize it, I said. It was easier to believe I was the problem. You're right, and I'm sorry. Your mom talked about you recently, about how you're in Chicago working with kids. She said you saved Marcus and Emma, that they're doing well because of you. She said you were always the adult in that house, and she resents you for it but also knows it's true. She resents me for being what she should have been? Yeah, messed up, right? But she's working on it. I just thought you should know. After we hung up, I sat in my dark office for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. 4 years since that Monday morning. 4 years since I'd signed that agreement and watched my mother's world crumble. 4 years since I'd sent the bill and watched her pay it. Was it revenge? Maybe. But it was also justice. It was forcing someone to face the consequences of their choices, to see what they'd been avoiding for 19 years. It was refusing to be anyone's solution except my own. I didn't forgive Linda. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I understood her better. She'd been broken in ways I probably would never fully comprehend, and she'd broken me in return. That was the cycle. But I'd stepped out of it. I'd refused to continue the pattern. As the months turned into years, I climbed the ranks at my nonprofit. I became a supervisor, then a program director. I went back to school part-time for my master's degree in social work. I dated occasionally, though relationships were hard when you'd spent your formative years learning that people would always let you down. But I was working on it. Marcus graduated high school with honors and got a soccer scholarship to a small college in Ohio. Emma was thriving in high school, captain of the debate team, dreaming of law school. They visited me in Chicago during summer breaks, and we built a new relationship, one where I was their sister, not their substitute mother. It was healthier for all of us. On the 5-year anniversary of that Monday morning, I finally called Linda. She answered on the third ring, her voice tentative. Sophia? Hi, Mom. We talked for an hour. She told me about her life, her therapy, her job. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to rewrite history. She owned what she'd done, acknowledged the damage. I destroyed your childhood, she said quietly. And then when you tried to force me to be a parent, I blamed you for my failures. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I need you to know I understand now. I see it all clearly. I'm glad you're working on yourself, I said. But I need you to understand something. I may never fully forgive you. What you did, what you put me through, it changed me fundamentally. I can't ever get those years back. I know. But I don't hate you anymore. I just feel sad for both of us. For what we could have been if you'd been able to be the mother I needed. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I know you are, and maybe that's enough for now. We didn't have a tearful reunion. We didn't suddenly become a normal mother and daughter. But we had something. A thread of connection, fragile but real. It was more than I'd had in years. Life continued its forward motion. I got promoted again. I published research papers on childhood trauma and resilience. I started giving talks at conferences, sharing my story anonymously, using it to educate others about the realities of parentification and neglect. On my 30th birthday, I looked around at the life I'd built. I had a nice apartment in a safe neighborhood. I had meaningful work that made a difference. I had Marcus and Emma, both thriving in their own lives. I had friends, real ones, who knew my story and loved me anyway. I even had a boyfriend, a kind man named David who worked as a teacher and understood why I sometimes struggled with trust. I thought about that scared, angry 19-year-old who'd signed a piece of paper and watched her world burn. I thought about how lost I'd felt, how much I'd wanted to be free, but also how terrified I'd been of what that freedom would cost. That girl had been brave in ways she didn't even realize. She'd made an impossible choice and lived with the consequences. She'd sent the bill and watched it get paid, and she'd survived the fallout. I called my grandmother that evening, as I did every week. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Do you think I was wrong for what I did with that agreement? She was quiet for a long moment. I think you were backed into a corner and did the only thing you could do. Was it kind? No. Was it necessary? Probably. Your mother needed to face reality, and sometimes reality is cruel. I destroyed her life. No, honey. She'd already destroyed it. You just stopped holding the pieces together. There's a difference. Maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't destroyed anything. Maybe I'd just stopped preventing the natural consequences of Linda's choices. Maybe refusing to save someone isn't the same as hurting them. Years continued to pass. I earned my doctorate in social work. Dr. Sophia Martinez. Who would have thought? I joined the faculty at a university, teaching future social workers and therapists. I wrote a book about parentification and childhood resilience that became required reading in many graduate programs. Marcus got married to a wonderful woman he met in college. Emma went to law school and became an advocate for children's rights. We all turned out okay, better than okay. We'd taken our pain and transformed it into purpose. I even saw Linda occasionally. Brief lunches, careful conversations. We'd never be close, but we'd reached a détente. She'd become a volunteer at a women's shelter, using her experience to help other struggling mothers. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it was something. One afternoon, I was cleaning out old files in my home office when I found it. The agreement. That ridiculous notarized document that had changed everything. I read through it again, marveling at how official it looked. How seriously Linda had taken the performance of being a mother while completely missing the actual substance. I should have been angry looking at it, but I wasn't. I just felt a distant sort of pity. For young Sophia, who'd been forced to take such drastic action. For Linda, who'd been so lost she couldn't see what she was doing to her children. For all of us, trapped in a cycle of dysfunction that had taken years to break. I took a photo of the agreement and sent it to Marcus and Emma in a group text. Found this while cleaning. Can you believe this was real? Marcus responded first. That was the day everything changed. Best worst day of my life. Emma added, You saved us, Sophie. I know it cost you a lot, but you saved us. Emma, we saved each other, I typed back. We all got out. That night, I had dinner with David. We'd been together for 3 years now, and he'd asked me to move in with him. I'd said I needed time to think about it, but really, I already knew my answer. Yes, I was ready. Ready to trust, ready to build something with someone, ready to believe that not everyone would let me down. I found something today. I told him over pasta, the agreement that started everything. The famous agreement, he said with a smile. He'd heard the story many times. How'd it feel to see it again? Strange, like looking at an artifact from someone else's life. That girl who signed it seems so young now, so desperate. She was brave, David said. She did what she had to do. Or she was cruel and vindictive and got lucky that it worked out. He reached across the table and took my hand. She was human. She was hurt and tired and pushed too far. She made a choice that had consequences and she lived with them. That's all any of us can do. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there were hundreds, Thousands of kids living the life I'd lived. Kids raising their siblings, paying bills they shouldn't have to pay, sacrificing their childhoods because the adults in their lives had abdicated responsibility. I couldn't save them all. I couldn't even save most of them. But I could keep doing the work. I could keep researching, teaching, advocating. I could keep telling my story, showing that survival was possible, that you could come out the other side and build a life worth living. The bill had come due for Linda all those years ago, and she'd paid it. But I'd paid a price too. The price of losing my innocence, of learning too young that the people who are supposed to protect you sometimes can't or won't. The price of carrying responsibility no child should carry, the price of making an impossible choice and living with the aftermath. But I'd also gained something. Strength, yes, but more than that. Clarity. The knowledge that I could survive anything. The certainty that I was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth saving. Linda had tried to make me believe I only had value if I was useful to her, but I'd proven her wrong. I had value simply because I existed, because I was human, because I deserved to be loved and cared for just like anyone else. It had taken years to truly believe that. Years of therapy, of building healthy relationships, of learning to trust. But I was there now. I was whole, or as whole as someone with my history could be. I carried scars, yes, but they were healed scars. They no longer bled. I picked up my phone and opened my messages, found the thread with Linda, typed out a message. "I'm doing well, Mom. Really well. I hope you are too. Maybe we could have lunch next month when I visit Marcus?" Her response came quickly. "I'd like that. Thank you for giving me another chance, even though I don't deserve it." "We all deserve chances," I typed back. "Even when we mess up, even when we hurt people, we all deserve the opportunity to change." I meant it too. Not because I'd fully forgiven her, not because the hurt had disappeared, but because holding on to anger was exhausting, and I'd been tired for so long. It was time to rest. Time to let go. Time to move forward. The next morning, I called David and told him yes, I'd move in with him. We'd build a life together, a healthy one, based on mutual respect and actual partnership. We'd probably mess up sometimes, because that's what humans do, but we'd try. We'd keep trying. I called Marcus and Emma and told them I loved them, that I was proud of them, that they'd taken the second chance I'd tried to give them and made something beautiful with it. I called my grandmother and thanked her for stepping up when Linda couldn't, for giving Marcus and Emma the stability they'd needed. And then I sat down at my desk and started writing. Not a research paper this time, but a memoir. My story, told in full, with all its messy complexity and painful truths. A story about a girl who raised herself and two other children. A girl who got pushed too far and pushed back. A girl who demanded accountability and watched the consequences unfold. A girl who survived and eventually thrived. I titled it, "The Bill Always Comes Due," a story of survival, revenge, and redemption. Because that's what it was. Not just a revenge story, though it certainly started as one. Not just a survival story, though survival was a huge part of it. But a story about how sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop saving everyone else. How sometimes making people face consequences is an act of mercy, not cruelty. How the bill always comes due, one way or another, and the only choice we have is whether to pay it willingly or have it extracted by force. Linda's bill had been extracted by force. She'd spent years avoiding payment, making others pay for her, and when that stopped, reality crashed down on her. It had been devastating. Necessary, but devastating. My bill was different. I'd been paying since I was 7 years old, paying in lost childhood and stolen innocence and premature responsibility. That Monday morning, I'd stopped making payments I didn't owe. I'd handed the bill to its rightful owner and walked away. Was it revenge? Maybe. But it was also liberation. Justice. Self-preservation. It was all of those things at once. Messy and complicated and imperfect, just like life itself. As I wrote, words flowing faster than I could type them, I realized something. I'd been so focused on whether what I'd done was right or wrong, cruel or kind, justified or excessive. But those were the wrong questions. The real question was simpler. Had I survived? Had I built a life worth living? Had I broken the cycle? The answer to all three was yes. I'd survived. Against all odds, through all the chaos and pain and impossible choices, I'd made it. I was here, 30 years old, with a career I loved and people I cared about and a future that looked bright. I'd built a life worth living. Not perfect, but mine. Earned through blood and sweat and tears, built on a foundation of hard-won strength and resilience. And I'd broken the cycle. I would never do to a child what had been done to me. I would never burden a 7-year-old with adult responsibilities. I would never prioritize my own comfort over a child's well-being. The dysfunction stopped with me. That was enough. That had to be enough. I wrote through the afternoon and into the evening, the story pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. Every painful memory, every moment of doubt, Every small victory and devastating loss, I wrote it all down, honest and raw and true. When I finally stopped, hours later, my hands cramping and my eyes burning, I had the bones of something real, something that might help other people who'd lived through similar situations. Something that might give voice to all the invisible children out there, the ones raising their siblings and paying their parents' bills and sacrificing their futures because no one else would step up. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I'd edit, I'd revise and polish and make it publishable. But tonight, I just wanted to sit with what I'd accomplished. I'd told my story. I'd owned it, all of it, the good and the bad and the ugly. I'd stopped running from it, stopped minimizing it, stopped pretending it was less traumatic than it was. And in telling it, I'd found something I didn't expect. Peace. Not forgiveness necessarily, not for Linda or even entirely for myself. But peace with what had happened, acceptance of the path I'd walked and the person it had made me. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window, seeing the face of a woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side. There were lines around my eyes from stress and sleepless nights. There was gray starting to thread through my dark hair, but there was also strength in that face, wisdom, compassion earned through suffering. I wasn't that desperate 19-year-old anymore, signing an agreement and hoping for the best. I wasn't even that angry, hurt girl who'd watched her siblings get taken away and felt vindicated by her mother's destruction. I was someone new, someone forged in fire and tempered by time. I was Dr. Sophia Martinez, professor, author, advocate, survivor, sister, girlfriend, friend, granddaughter. And yes, even daughter, in the most complicated sense of the word. I was all of those things, and I was enough, just as I was, just as I'd always been. The bill had come due all those years ago. Linda had paid it, but in a way, so had I. I'd paid with my innocence, with my easy trust in the world, with the childhood I'd never get back. Those were payments I could never reclaim, but I'd also received something in return, a steely core of resilience that nothing could break, the knowledge that I could survive anything, the certainty of my own strength. And maybe, just maybe, the wisdom to know that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. I didn't regret signing that agreement. I didn't regret watching it all fall apart. I didn't regret any of it, because it had led me here, to this life, to this moment of peace and understanding. The girl I'd been would be proud of the woman I'd become. That much, at least, I knew for certain. And as I turned away from the window and prepared for bed, I whispered a thank you to that younger version of myself. Thank you for being brave when you had to be. Thank you for making the hard choices. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for giving me the chance to be here, now, whole and alive and free. The bill always comes due. But survival, real survival, means learning how to pay it without losing yourself in the process. And I'd done that. Against all odds, I'd done that. That was my victory. Not the destruction of my mother's life, but the construction of my own. Not revenge, but rebirth. Not an ending, but a beginning. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.